A blanket of smoke smothers the landscape so thick that the streetlights turn on in the middle of the day. It's so thick, in fact, that it stings your nose to breathe. This is a scene which has become all too common in Alberta over the past couple decades. You've probably heard of the destruction wildfire has had on communities such as Fort McMurray and Slave Lake. You also likely know that as climate change progresses, more frequent and severe wildfires are expected. Much attention has focused on wildfire impacts to drinking water supplies and treatment. But have you ever thought about how fires impact the infrastructure used to manage your waste and stormwater? Part of my project with EPCOR Utilities has been to study the risk of exactly that: urban wildfire impacts on drainage in Edmonton. As you can imagine, Edmonton is not at the same level of wildfire risk as Fort McMurray or Slave Lake. Edmonton has a lower likelihood of a wildfire occurring based off of surrounding land use, access to firefighting resources, and early reporting. However, the Edmonton River Valley is the largest contiguous urban park system in Canada, which has undergone decades of fire suppression, and therefore does pose an urban wildfire risk. With that in mind, I started my project by asking EPCOR professionals, what would happen to the drainage system if a wildfire went through Edmonton? What assets and resources are most vulnerable? As you can imagine, the vulnerability was most associated with above-ground components of drainage assets, such as pump station buildings, electrical panels, trestle structures, as well as above-ground power lines and substations feeding electricity to these assets. In these discussions, we also determined how to mitigate impacts, focusing on what EPCOR can do to prevent a wildfire from reaching these assets. And if a wildfire does reach an asset, what can be done to limit the consequences? For example, if a fire burns a pump station, how do we continue to provide service and limit releases of untreated wastewater? Examples of adaptation include having backup power sources, vegetation management, moving to more fire-resistant building materials, having emergency plans in place, just to name a few. Once we identified the potential impacts and adaptation measures, I proceeded to rank individual assets based on relative level of wildfire risk. This allows EPCOR to strategically implement adaptation to get the greatest reduction in this risk. By conducting this analysis now, EPCOR can be proactive rather than reactive when it comes to wildfire. Edmonton is taking lessons learned from other communities and applying them to Edmonton. Action is being taken to protect Edmontonians from future wildfire events. Ultimately, projects such as these make EPCOR and Edmonton more climate resilient.